There's a man grilling hot dogs on my patio. I don't know his name, he's wearing my apron, and he just asked if I have any Dijon mustard. Behind him, 3 kids are cannonballing into my pool, a woman is using my garden hose to rinse off her dog, and someone parked their Honda Civic on my actual lawn. And all of this is happening on my property, my private backyard that I paid for, maintain, and explicitly have fenced and deeded as mine. At first, I think I'm hallucinating. Maybe I blacked out and woke up in an alternate universe where I Airbnb'd my house without knowing. But then I see her, Karen. Khaki capris, oversized sunglasses, clipboard in hand like some suburban general inspecting her troop. She's walking around like she owns the place, which is funny, because last I checked, her house is 4 doors down and nowhere near this disaster she's orchestrating on my turf. That's when it hits me. This isn't a misunderstanding. It's a full-blown turf invasion. And if she wants war, she picked the wrong backyard. It all started 3 months ago when I moved into what was supposed to be a peaceful cul-de-sac on the edge of Cascadia Hills. I work remotely as a software engineer, which basically means I spend my days talking to people in 3 time zones while wearing pajama bottoms. All I wanted was a quiet place with decent Wi-Fi and enough yard to install a grill and maybe a hammock. This house had everything: space, privacy, and a generous backyard that backed up to a greenbelt. It was perfect, until I met Karen Thompson. Karen is the self-appointed queen of the HOA, though no one remembers ever voting for her. She's got that permanent squint that screams suspicion and a tone that turns every sentence into an accusation. Within the first week, she dropped off a 10-page welcome packet filled with rules, half of which seemed made up, including one stating that lawn decorations may not exceed 4 inches in height unless seasonally sanctioned. Whatever that means. I smiled, nodded, and mentally filed her under handle with extreme caution. The first couple of weeks were uneventful, aside from a few passive-aggressive notes about my trash bins being too visible from the street. Then came the Saturday. I walked out back to water the succulents and nearly tripped over a cooler full of beer that wasn't mine. Looking up, I saw the invasion in full swing. People lounging under umbrellas, a folding table covered in chips and salsa, some dude making margaritas in a blender plugged into my outdoor outlet. My outdoor outlet. I tried to approach calmly. I tapped the guy at the grill on the shoulder and asked, "Excuse me, but what's going on here?" He smiled like I was the weird one and said, "Oh hey, Karen said we could use the community space today. Great spot, by the way. You must live nearby." That's when I laughed out loud. Not because it was funny, but because if I didn't, I'd scream. I told him this wasn't community space. It was my backyard. He blinked, then pointed at Karen, who was holding court by the pool and handing out reusable plates. Marching over to her felt like walking into enemy territory. "Karen," I said, keeping my voice even, "why are there strangers in my backyard?" She didn't flinch. "Oh hi Jake. Don't be silly, this is community green space. It's marked on the HOA's original property map. Didn't you read the handbook?" She gestured to the crowd like she was hosting a neighborhood potluck, and I was the awkward guy who forgot to bring a dish. I told her I had the updated property plat filed with the city, clearly marking the entire area as my private lot. Her smile didn't even flicker. "Maps can be misleading," she said. "Besides, you weren't using it." I stood there, stunned, surrounded by potato salad thieves and pool float invaders, and realized Karen wasn't just mistaken, she had orchestrated this. She'd invited people onto land she didn't own and convinced them it was some kind of shared amenity. And worse, she was completely unbothered when confronted. I asked her to get everyone to leave. She told me to chill out and enjoy the sense of community. That's when I knew. This wasn't going to be solved with a polite conversation. I called the non-emergency police line just to check my options. The officer I spoke with said that yes, legally, I could ask everyone to leave and consider it trespassing if they refused. But he also warned that if I wanted long-term peace, I might need to take it up with the HOA. Which was laughable, because the HOA was the problem. And it wasn't just today. Neighbors I barely knew started telling me stories. Karen rerouting dog walking paths across driveways, Karen unlocking people's gates for maintenance workers without notice, Karen once hiring a band to play at her house and setting up speakers that faced the neighbor's yard instead of her own. She wasn't just entitled, she was a menace. That night, I sat on my patio, now cleaned up but still smelling faintly of grilled corn and Karen's hubris, and thought about how to handle this. I could lawyer up. I could escalate to the city. But those were slow, boring solutions. I wanted something faster. Something louder. And that's when the idea hit me. My cousin Tank, yes, that's his real nickname, is getting married. He's the chaplain for a biker club called the Southern Sons. They'd been looking for a venue for weeks, but kept getting turned down for being too rowdy. I knew for a fact Tank would love the space. And if Karen thought my backyard was a public park, then I'd give her an event she'd never forget. I picked up my phone, dialed Tank, and said, "How would you like to have your biker wedding at my place? Open bar, full band, and fireworks included." Tank shouted so loud with joy I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "Just tell me when, cousin. We'll bring the whole gang." As I hung up and imagined Karen's reaction to 50 Harley engines revving outside her white picket fence, I finally felt the peace she'd stolen from me return. It was temporary, sure, but I knew that the best revenge was loud, legal, and impossible to ignore. Let the HOA try to find me. Let Karen call the cops. Because soon, she'd learn the hard way. You don't trespass on a nerd's backyard and expect to walk away unscathed. Tank didn't waste a second. By the next morning, he had a group chat going with me, his fiancée Darla, and about a dozen of his biker brothers. The messages rolled in fast. Questions about parking space for motorcycles, where they could put up temporary tents, whether I'd mind a tattoo artist setting up a booth near the fire pit. At one point, someone asked if I had room for a mechanical bull. I thought they were joking, but Tank replied, "Just bring the inflatable mat, we'll figure it out." Darla chimed in saying she wanted a fire-breathing performer for the first dance. I was half terrified, half thrilled. This wasn't just a wedding anymore. This was a full-on spectacle in the making, and it was going to happen right under Karen's nose. Darla was sweet, but had an edge. She worked in event planning, mostly for alternative weddings, so this was like her Super Bowl. She told me she'd handle the permits, rental equipment, and caterers. You just keep your yard open and make sure your neighbors know they're welcome, unless they're HOA board members. In that case, they can watch from behind their curtains. I offered to chip in financially, but Darla refused. "You're already giving us the venue," she said. "Besides, Tank says this is revenge. Revenge doesn't come with a price tag." I liked her already. In just 3 days, my once quiet backyard transformed into something out of a rock concert. Darla brought in a wedding planner friend who specialized in themed events. Giant Gothic lanterns hung from strings of fairy lights. A stage was set up on the far side of the yard, complete with sound equipment and a light rig that pulsed different colors during the soundcheck. There was even a custom arch shaped like two intertwined motorcycle handlebars for Tank and Darla to say their vows under. I watched it all go up with a mixture of awe and anticipation, sipping coffee like a man about to commit the most satisfying act of civil disobedience imaginable. The neighbors were curious. Some cautiously peeked over their fences. A few came by to ask what was happening, and I was honest. "Biker wedding," I said, "with live music and fireworks." Some raised eyebrows. Others laughed and asked if they could attend. I said anyone who wasn't on the HOA board or married to Karen was more than welcome. Word spread fast. People started bringing lawn chairs and offering to help set up. I hadn't even meant to start a movement, but somehow, this whole fiasco was turning into a party the neighborhood actually wanted. Karen showed up on the 4th day of setup, right as Tank's crew was unloading 2 kegs and a drum set. She stormed across my driveway, weaving between motorcycles like she was dodging landmines. I was helping Darla hang black and red streamers when I saw her stomping up, face already flushed. "What is going on here?" she demanded, arms crossed, voice sharp enough to slice drywall. I gave her my most innocent smile. "Just setting up for a small community event." "This is not sanctioned by the HOA, she snapped. I nodded. "Good thing it's on my private property then." Karen narrowed her eyes. "You can't host public events without board approval. There are safety concerns, noise regulations. And who even are these people?" That's when Tank stepped in. All 6'4" of him, bearded, tattooed, wearing a leather vest that said, "Southern Sons, Road Captain." He extended a hand. "Hi there, ma'am. Name's Tank. Groom-to-be. You must be the lady who thinks this guy's backyard belongs to everyone. Pleasure to meet the source of our inspiration." Karen did not take his hand. "This is highly inappropriate," she huffed. Tank turned to me and said loudly, "Jake, can we move the mechanical bull closer to the street? I want to make sure people driving by know where the fun is." Karen's eyes practically twitched out of her head. "This will not stand," she hissed. "You'll be fined. All of you. I'm calling an emergency HOA meeting." I waved at her over my shoulder as she stomped away. "Looking forward to it. Bring snacks." That night, sure enough, I received a notice shoved under my door. Emergency HOA meeting, mandatory attendance, location, Community Rec Center. I showed up early, wearing a shirt that said, "My backyard, my rules," and brought a printed copy of my property lines, the city zoning permit for private events, and a fresh copy of the HOA bylaws. Karen sat at the head of the folding table like a scorned monarch. She opened the meeting with a list of complaints: noise violations, unsafe gatherings, improper use of shared space. I waited my turn. When she was done, I stood up, handed out the documents, and walked them through everything. I own the land. The city approved the event. It's a private wedding, not a public concert. The guest list is curated, and yes, there will be fireworks, but they're legal, supervised, and pre-approved by the fire marshal. Any questions? The room went quiet. The HOA lawyer, a bored-looking man in a wrinkled blazer, cleared his throat. "He's within his rights." Karen looked like she might scream. "But the spirit of the neighborhood isn't legally binding," I interrupted. Several other board members looked relieved. One of them, a man named Greg, whispered to me on the way out, "Honestly, I can't wait. She made us shut down a kids' lemonade stand last month." The next day, the final pieces rolled in. Darla brought in a catering truck that served tacos and bourbon-glazed ribs. A bartender set up a bar shaped like a coffin. The mechanical bull arrived in all its inflatable glory. And then came the cherry on top. A beat-up van with the words "Big Bang Pyro Company" spray-painted on the side. Two guys climbed out and began assembling what looked like a 4th of July finale in my backyard. They wore matching shirts that said, "We make noise look beautiful." Karen was spotted that afternoon standing on her roof with binoculars. I waved. To keep my own sanity, I had soundproof insulation temporarily added to my bedroom and office. I also parked my car in a neighbor's driveway in case Karen tried to get it towed. Every contingency was covered. The day before the wedding, Tank gave a speech at the final walkthrough. "This isn't just a wedding," he said. "This is a stand for property rights, for love, and for the right to party without HOA tyranny. Let freedom and fireworks ring." Everyone cheered. I nodded quietly, watching Karen's blinds twitch across the street. She had no idea what was coming. And honestly, that made it even better. The morning of the wedding started with the deep, unmistakable rumble of motorcycle engines rolling in like thunder. I was still brushing my teeth when the first group arrived, 10 bikes strong, perfectly synchronized, flags flying, leather gleaming in the morning sun. They lined up along the street like a cavalry of chrome and rebellion. The neighbors came out in bathrobes, coffee mugs in hand, staring with a mix of awe and panic. Some waved. A few filmed. One elderly couple even brought out folding chairs to watch. But from across the street, behind a perfectly trimmed hedge and two gnomes dressed like firefighters, Karen stood frozen on her porch, mouth open, one hand gripping her pearl necklace like she'd just witnessed a crime scene. By noon, the entire block felt transformed. My yard had been converted into a full-blown wedding festival. The arch was up, decorated with black roses and miniature skulls in top hats. The taco truck was already serving brunch burritos. A cover band was doing a sound check, blasting a heavy metal version of Here Comes the Bride that actually sounded kind of amazing. Tank arrived in full gear, flanked by his best men, all in matching denim vests with patches that read, "United by Road, Bound by Love." Darla wasn't far behind, riding on the back of her cousin's chopper, her wedding dress flowing behind her like the flag of some newly declared nation. The ceremony was scheduled for 4, but people began gathering hours earlier. Guests brought gifts, lawn chairs, coolers, and enough beer to sink a canoe. My neighbors, well, the cool ones, mingled like they were at Coachella. Karen made 3 separate appearances, each time stomping around the perimeter, whispering furiously into her phone. At one point, she pointed directly at a man roasting corn over a portable flame and yelled, "That's an open fire violation." The man, without breaking stride, responded, "Ma'am, I am the fire marshal," and proceeded to offer her a roasted ear. She stormed away in a huff, clutching her clipboard like it was a shield. Then came the ceremony. At exactly 4 o'clock, the band went silent, and the revving of engines took over. Each groomsman rode down the makeshift aisle on their bike, stopping just short of the altar and forming a roaring semicircle. Tank entered last, helmet under his arm, eyes shining. Darla appeared at the top of the deck stairs, radiant in a white leather dress with silver chains draped across the bodice. Her veil was made of lace and black mesh, and as she descended the steps, the band played a slowed-down, haunting version of Sweet Child O' Mine. It was oddly perfect. The vows were surprisingly heartfelt. Tank promised to always carry extra fuel, both literal and emotional. Darla vowed to never complain about oil stains on the driveway. There were tears, laughter, and a very moving tribute to Tank's late pit bull, which somehow brought the entire front row to tears. They sealed it with a kiss as the crowd erupted in applause, engines revved in celebration, and someone popped a confetti cannon that shot red and black streamers into the air. But, of course, Karen wasn't done. Halfway through the reception, just as the band launched into a surprisingly decent metal cover of Can't Help Falling in Love, the lights flickered. Then they went out completely. The band stopped playing. The DJ's laptop shut down. The drink machine fizzled. For a few seconds there was just silence, and then confused murmurs began to spread through the crowd. I rushed around the side of the house and found the culprit fast. Karen. Standing beside the utility box with a crowbar in hand, and a look of smug righteousness painted across her face. "I warned you," she said, not even flinching as I walked up. "This is a danger to the community. I had to do something." "Karen," I said, trying to stay calm, "you just tampered with private utility infrastructure. That's not just petty. That's illegal." "I'm the HOA president," she barked. "I have authority here." "You have authority over hedges and mailbox colors," I snapped. "Not city utilities." That's when the fire marshal walked up behind me. "Ma'am," he said firmly, "did you touch that box?" Karen looked at him like he was a mosquito. I had no choice. He looked down at the crowbar still in her hand and then pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, I've got a woman here interfering with electrical infrastructure. Might need a unit." Karen's eyes widened. "Wait, what?" I cut her off. "Everything's recorded," I said, pointing to the small camera mounted near the gutter. "So unless you want a police report with your name on it, I suggest you walk back to your house, keep your hands to yourself, and maybe take a long look at what personal boundaries mean." Karen didn't reply. She just turned and walked off, her steps slightly less confident than before. Thankfully, I'd planned for sabotage. Within minutes, the backup generator kicked in. The lights flickered back on. The music resumed. The crowd cheered like it was the end of a rock concert. One of the bikers handed me a beer and said, "That was better than the fireworks." Speaking of which, those came next. At exactly 8:30, the sky lit up with the first blast. It wasn't just a few sparklers either. These were full-blown, professionally launched pyrotechnic. Blues, reds, silver bursts that exploded into cascading showers. The crowd gasped and clapped as the sky danced. Kids whooped with joy. One guy even proposed to his girlfriend right then and there, holding up a ring as a heart-shaped firework exploded behind them. Karen made one last attempt to ruin it all. She marched down the street in her robe, holding a garden hose like it was a weapon. But as she approached, the fire marshal and 2 police officers, who'd been invited and were eating tacos, stepped in her way. One of them held out a plate and said, "Ma'am, please relax and enjoy the show. We've got this under control." Karen froze. She looked around and realized no one was backing her up. Not her fellow board members, not the neighbors, not even her husband, who had apparently slipped away to join the festivities. She turned around slowly, hose dragging behind her, and retreated into the night. By the end of it, people were dancing barefoot on the grass, the lights were glowing like a concert stage, and Tank and Darla were officially married. I stood there, beer in hand, watching the final firework burst into 1,000 gold sparks and thought, this might be the most satisfying day of my life. Karen had thrown everything she had at me. Rules, threats, sabotage, and in the end, all she managed to do was make my party more legendary. What she didn't know, what she still hadn't grasped, was that I hadn't just fought back. I'd turned her own twisted sense of authority into the stage for her downfall. She wanted to control everything. Instead, she ended up as a footnote in the best party our street had ever seen. The morning after the wedding felt like the calm after a storm, if the storm had included leather jackets, fireworks, and 3 separate marriage proposals. My backyard was a mess of empty cups, stomped confetti, and a lone motorcycle helmet resting on a garden gnome. The good news was that cleanup was already underway. Tank's crew, true to their word, were surprisingly efficient. By 10 a.m., the stage was coming down, trash bags were piled neatly by the curb, and someone was even power washing my patio. It was the kind of post-party morning that somehow still smelled like smoked ribs and victory. But the peace didn't last. I'd barely finished my second cup of coffee when I heard the crunch of angry footsteps on gravel. I turned around just in time to see Karen marching up my driveway like she was leading a battalion. Her eyes were red from either lack of sleep or sheer fury, and she was waving a thick manila envelope like it was the sword of justice. Behind her trailed 2 of the lesser HOA board members, Greg, who always looked like he regretted being there, and Linda, who carried a tablet and seemed more interested in logging everything than actually participating. "Jake," Karen snapped, stopping in front of me with the air of someone about to deliver a royal decree. "You've left us with no choice. We're initiating formal proceedings against you. You've committed multiple violations of the HOA's community guidelines, disturbing the peace, unauthorized public gathering, illegal signage, and hosting a mechanical bull without board approval." I blinked. "That last one's not real." "It is now," she hissed. Greg awkwardly cleared his throat. "Actually, Karen, the board hasn't voted on any of this yet." Karen spun on him. "Greg, you agreed to back me." "I said I'd attend the meeting," he replied weakly. "Not declare war." I could barely hold back a grin. Karen, realizing her backup was melting like butter in the sun, turned back to me and shoved the envelope into my hand. "Regardless, we've received over a dozen complaints from concerned residents. Your behavior has made people feel unsafe. You've tarnished the image of our community." I opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of paper, photos, emails, and printed screenshots from what appeared to be next-door rants and poorly cropped Facebook posts. One particularly blurry photo showed me laughing next to a guy holding a smoked turkey leg like a microphone. The caption read, "This is what the HOA is allowing now?" "Karen," I said calmly, "most of these complaints are just your own posts. I can see your name on half of them." She opened her mouth to object, but Linda suddenly stepped forward with a quiet cough. "Actually, we've also received counter-feedback." Karen turned sharply. "What?" Linda looked down at her tablet. "Over 20 emails and voicemails from residents thanking Jake for hosting. A few said it was the most fun they've had in years. One guy wrote a poem." "A poem?" Karen repeated, horrified. Linda nodded. "Also, someone started a petition to rename the community park Freedom Field. It's got 60 signatures so far." Karen's left eye twitched. "This is absurd. That was a display of chaos. We're supposed to be a respectable neighborhood." I looked around at the now quiet street. A few neighbors were outside chatting happily, one of them wearing a wedding favor t-shirt that read "Love Rides Loud." "Looks pretty respectable to me," I said. "Besides, you said it yourself. It was a community space." She pointed at me furiously. "You tricked everyone." "I just took your logic to its natural conclusion," I said. "You wanted my yard to be a public venue? I gave you a front row seat." Karen had nothing to say to that. She turned and stormed off again, leaving Greg and Linda awkwardly behind. Greg gave me a small nod and followed her. Linda hesitated, then smiled slightly and said, "The fireworks show was really good." By the next HOA meeting, things had shifted. A lot. Karen tried to rally her usual allies, but they were suddenly less enthusiastic. Turns out, a lot of folks had enjoyed themselves at the wedding. More importantly, many of them had realized just how exhausting Karen had become. Someone pointed out how she fined them for having a decorative frog statue that was too whimsical. Another brought up the time she banned inflatable holiday decorations because they encouraged tackiness. The mood in the room wasn't just against me, it was turning against her. I stood up, presented my case, and ended with a video montage I had thrown together the night before. It included clips from the wedding, footage of Karen attempting to cut power, and a slow-motion pan across smiling neighbors, kids dancing, and one guy fist-pumping during the fireworks finale. The last frame was a shot of my deed, zoomed in on the property line. There was silence when it ended. Then someone clapped. Then more joined in. Karen didn't clap. Instead, she stood and gave one of the most chaotic, spiraling speeches I've ever witnessed. She accused me of inciting a coup, manipulating the neighborhood, and undermining the values of suburban civility. She even claimed I trained a dog to bark every time she walked past my house. I don't even own a dog. The vote to remove her as HOA president passed with an overwhelming majority. And the twist? The woman nominated to replace her was Darla. Turns out, she and Tank had decided to buy a house in the neighborhood after the wedding. She got her real estate license approved just in time to attend the meeting as a full-fledged resident. When someone jokingly suggested she should take over the HOA, she laughed, and then agreed. "Honestly," she said, "after planning that wedding, running a neighborhood will be easy." Karen left the meeting in stunned silence. Her rule was officially over. In the following days, things started to change. The new HOA board revised the bylaws to remove half the ridiculous rules Karen had installed over the years. Decorative frogs were now fully allowed. Inflatable Santas made a comeback. People started hanging out more, inviting neighbors over, even hosting driveway movie night. It was like the neighborhood took a deep breath for the first time in years. As for me, I received thank you notes, home-cooked meals, and one very enthusiastic hug from the guy who proposed during the firework. My yard remained my yard, but now it was affectionately referred to as the venue. Someone even made a Google Maps listing for it as a joke. I didn't mind. I'd earned that reputation. Karen, meanwhile, went quiet. For weeks, no one saw her. Her lawn grew out of regulation. Her mailbox leaned slightly to the left. She didn't post on Nextdoor, didn't show up at meetings, and didn't file a single complaint. It was almost eerie. Until one day, a big moving truck showed up. Karen was gone by nightfall. She left no forwarding address. No goodbye. Just a single handwritten note posted to the community bulletin board that read, "Some people don't appreciate order." Someone crossed it out and wrote underneath, "Some people don't appreciate tyrants." And just like that, the chapter of Karen closed. But for me and the rest of the neighborhood, a new one had just begun. One with fewer rules, more cookouts, and absolutely no HOA presidents with clipboards. There was something strangely poetic about the way peace returned to Cascadia Hills, not with silence, but with music, laughter, and the occasional rev of a Harley engine echoing down the cul-de-sac. In the weeks after Karen's departure, the neighborhood began to breathe again. It wasn't loud or wild all the time. No, it was something better. Balanced. Happy. People started talking to each other, waving more often, organizing things like weekend BBQs and driveway potlucks without worrying about whether their chairs matched HOA-approved color palette. For the first time since I'd moved in, the place felt alive. It felt like a neighborhood should. Tank and Darla settled into their new home 2 streets over, and it didn't take long before they became community favorite. Darla took her new HOA president title more seriously than anyone expected, but in the best way. She streamlined communication, eliminated the useless bylaws, and held monthly meetings with actual food instead of dry cookies and awkward silences. Tank, meanwhile, became a sort of unofficial neighborhood enforcer, not with rules but with generosity. If someone's tire went flat, he was there with a jack. If a kid's bike chain broke, he'd fix it while making the kid promise to wear a helmet. And yes, if someone tried to mess with anyone again, you better believe Tank would be the first to knock on their door, smiling and ready to explain things in a tone that left no room for debate. As for me, well, I guess you could say I found my groove. I went back to work, but my yard became a bit of a local legend. People would walk by and casually mention how they remembered the biker wedding, like it was a Woodstock-level event. One neighbor actually asked if I was planning to host another. I laughed and told him, only if another Karen tries to claim my property. A running joke started after that. Anytime something ridiculous happened, someone would say, "You want another biker wedding?" Because that's how you get another biker wedding. One evening, as I was watering my plants, a man I didn't recognize approached the fence. He was tall, wore a suit too tight for his frame, and held a clipboard. I immediately tensed. There was something about a clipboard that gave me HOA flashback. He introduced himself as a reporter from a local online magazine. Apparently, word of the incident had spread. Someone had posted about it on Reddit, Entitled People or one of those viral forums, and the post blew up. He wanted to do a feature story. I hesitated, then said only if the article included Tank's vows and at least one photo of Karen midscream. He grinned and promised he'd do his best. The article went live a week later. The title was poetic: How a Biker Wedding Ended HOA Tyranny in Cascadia Hills. It included photos, quotes, even a map of the property lines for dramatic effect. The comments section was a goldmine. People wrote things like, "Justice tastes like barbecue," and "Let the man host his biker raves in peace." It got shared, reposted, and within days I started receiving messages from people around the country who had been dealing with similar HOA nightmares. One guy from Florida said, "You inspired me to host a mariachi concert in my garage." Another from Colorado emailed, "You've given me the strength to put up my inflatable Bigfoot again." I didn't know whether to laugh or be honored, so I did both. Things were good, almost suspiciously good. And then, just when I thought the final page had turned, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address, but the handwriting on it was unmistakably tight and aggressive. Inside was a photocopy of a formal complaint from a different HOA in a different state. Arizona, to be exact. Apparently, Karen had moved to a gated community in Scottsdale. According to the complaint, she had already attempted to implement emergency decorative restrictions, had reported her neighbor for using a grill on a weekday, and filed 6 noise complaints about birds. The best part? The complaint wasn't against her, it was about her. Someone, somehow, had found my story and sent it to the new HOA. Now they were compiling documentation and building a case to remove her from their board, where she had apparently tried to install herself within a month of arriving. There was even a line in the letter that read, "Do you have any further footage or history we might reference? Your experience could help us expedite action." I nearly dropped the letter from laughing so hard. I sat down at my computer and composed a reply. I attached the wedding video, the HOA meeting vote results, and a personal statement that began with, "Once upon a time, a woman with a clipboard tried to claim my backyard." I clicked send with a level of satisfaction most people only experience when hitting a game-winning shot or discovering they don't owe taxes. It felt like closure. The kind that doesn't come wrapped in courtroom drama or fines but in fireworks, friendship, and a quiet sense of justice. Karen had tried to control a neighborhood, then fled when it didn't go her way, only to find herself repeating the cycle elsewhere. Maybe she'd never change. But we had. And that was enough. That weekend, Tank and Darla hosted a block party, officially sanctioned by the new HOA, complete with flyers and a bounce house. The whole street showed up. Someone brought a karaoke machine. Another neighbor handed me a t-shirt they'd made that said, "Backyard Hero." I tried to play it cool, but inside I was beaming. Darla made a toast halfway through the night, raising her glass and saying, "Here's to Jake, for showing us what happens when you stand up to nonsense with a little strategy, a little firepower, and a whole lot of style." Everyone cheered. Tank revved his bike for emphasis, and as the music played and the lights twinkled overhead, I looked around at this weird, wonderful little community and felt something I hadn't in a long time: belonging. Not long after, a kid from the neighborhood rode by on his bike and called out, "Hey, Mr. Jake, when's the next biker wedding?" I smiled and said, "Hopefully never, buddy. But if we ever need one, I still have the arch." He nodded solemnly, like I'd just said something important. And maybe I had. Because sometimes the best way to deal with people who think they can control everything is to show them just how little power they really have, especially when a community stands together, especially when truth is louder than a clipboard. And if that truth happens to come with leather jackets and a fireworks finale, well, all the better.